liked it better Did it come?
What?
What I sent you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I've got it ready, but what I was asking, I sent you something. How are you printing these out?
How am I printing them out?
Yes, for the group. You said you wanted to distribute them.
Oh, yeah. I just got it. So, how did I print them out?
Like 30 copies.
Yeah.
You printed them all?
Yeah.
At home? Oh.
Yeah.
On
my little...
I mean, yeah, I'm thinking of the time and energy to do that. I'll be right
Oh,
back.
I know. But it got done, right?
Recording. That's live. Thank you.
Say that again.
That's live.
Oh, is that? So,
Sort of limits your mobility.
So of course I would buy but good morning. And as I told her, stand back while she does it, because Lord God Almighty may send a thunderbolt down the highest praying. What? Yeah, right.
Plus it has a lot of basic. It's very big.
You're welcome. I'm looking so forward to this. Me too.
College work there was
Oh, yeah, right up. Don't look like you need it.
Why don't we share?
A lot of people grew up with it. This is what I No, I played this before, so it's very expensive. I just was not good.
I'll keep the rest, and if I see somebody coming, I'll.
Yeah, I was just, no, but I meant, we would with somebody at the end of the road, catch, but whatever you want to do, you'll watch. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom. So, I have a few announcements to make before we begin. One of them is that I thank you to Maud, I think, for picking up the bagels. Just as a matter of coincidence, I, a long time ago, signed up for today to do bagels. So, sort of a double header for me. You all have, I trust, a copy of the handouts for today. We won't cover everything, I know we won't. But I expanded the footnotes so that you would have every little thought in my head, and could think about some of this stuff later. Those of you on streaming, I don't know quite where to look for the streamers, but I know you're here, or possibly here. If you want a copy of the handout, you can actually get a copy today, because if you sign in on your email to Jordan Tobin, and that email is jtobin, MD. Jordan is a doctor, so the MD stands for medical doctor, so it's jtobinmd@gmail.com. He has the file with him today and will press it and send it to you so that you will have it as you're watching. You could also write me and I'll mail you a copy. That's a whole other story, but it might be handy for any of you watching to have a copy of the handout since it's so substantial. Did you get a copy? Because there are spares around. Terry, do you need me?
I actually want to let you know the kids are still going to be back and forth in the hall. For it to be quiet, you guys might want to shut the doors.
Oh.
So there's no disruption, I'm sorry. I just want to let y'all know because
What do you all think?
it's all up to y'all, but the kids are going to be back and forth in the library and there could be a disturbance to what you have going on. I just didn't want to be a disturbance while I'm on.
Oh, okay. Oh, I get it.
But
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Enjoy.
The other announcement I would like to make is, since I am not returning to do this, now I will be here, but not for this role. I wonder if you will allow me just to speak for a while, sort of a long while, and save your questions and your comments for later. Is that okay? I don't have quite the facility, I don't have quite many of the facilities of Rabbi Klein, and people jumping into the conversation will definitely take me off track with anything that I want to say, and I will go off track with you very gladly. So if you could wait, that would be a help to me. So we're ready to begin, and I've asked Maya to pray the prayer, the blessing, in Hebrew, and I will follow in English.
ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר קידשנו במצוותיו, וציוונו לעשות דברי תורה. Amen.
And we praise you, Lord, our God, sovereign of the universe, who sanctifies us through God's commandment to enjoin upon us the obligation to immerse ourselves in the words of Torah. Amen. I chose as my title for today this title in blue on your papers, Learning from the Book of Exodus, from Sanctuary, that occupies most of the Book of Exodus, certainly from 1 to 17, when things change. And to society, meaning bringing us into the realm of holiness with the Holiness Code. And the last chapter, so Holiness Code 17 to 26, with the last chapter 27 added much later. In fact, the Holiness Code was added much later as well. It is all a key document, but the Holiness Code 16 to 26 or 27 is frequently designated in the scholarly literature as H, or for holiness, still written by the priestly school. Priestly school features predominantly in the book of Leviticus, as you know, and also in Numbers, and scattershot in Genesis and Exodus. This is its prime location, however. So, and I chose this little appendage, Sanctuary to Society. I borrowed it from Jonathan Sachs. He talks about from sanctuary to society. I thought I liked the expression and the fact that two S's sort of sounded really good to me. Why did I choose it? Well, first of all, because of this invitation, which I am honored to have. And also, number two, because of the affection of Rabbi Klein for the book of Exodus. If you screamed or were present, actually, last Friday, not last night, but a Friday ago, on the 5th of May, Rabbi Klein actually said these words, "I love Leviticus." And he repeated it the next morning here. However, when I heard it on Friday night, I thought two things. Me too, I do love it, believe it or not. But my first thought was, so do others. He's not alone in loving Leviticus. Now, this is really a stretch. However, you will notice on the page here, after the notation about the affection of the rabbi for Leviticus, that we have a quote from Jonathan Sachs. Now, recently deceased, but the preeminent rabbi in the UK with all kinds of honors and also an extraordinary author. If you try to collect all his books, you will need a new bookcase. This book, though, is precisely on Leviticus, from which I grabbed this little quote. Despite its apparent austerity, the priestly ethic set out in Leviticus speaks the language of love. So Rabbi Klein is not alone. Rabbi Sachs also endorses that there are people who love it. The third reason I chose the topic is because of the revived interest among scholars in the book of Leviticus. And the revived interest started in the 60s. So recently, there's been a major shift in studies about Leviticus. Christine Hayes, in her book, Introduction to the Bible, also a wonderful book, says up to that point, the 1960s, we were alive then. All of us here were alive in 1960, weren't we? I think. Said the book was deeply devalued. She said, there was a deep bias among scholars about the book who felt that the impurity rules were primitive, irrational taboos, and that sacrifice was controlled savagery without any redeeming value, any redeeming spiritual value for anyone. So let it go, everybody, was the feeling. Other religions that didn't have these purification rites were in better shape, scholars felt. Worldwide scholars, not necessarily scholars about the book of Leviticus who were Jewish. Without those rites, we're in a different order altogether. And that order was superior and enlightened. So it was a real downer. All of a sudden, in 1966, a woman, 45 years of age, living in London, published a book called Purity and Danger. Let me tell you the subtitle of the book. It is An Analysis of concepts of pollution and taboos. So much related to the book of Exodus, right? Her name is Mary Douglas. Patty London mentioned Mary Douglas in her presentation a couple of weeks ago. Mary Douglas was an anthropologist and a cultural theorist. The gist of the book, in one sentence, is purity is a key theme in every society. Wow. Imagine, 1966, this book comes out in London and then all over the world as the game changer. Not only that, Mary Douglas is a Roman Catholic, but she singles out a chapter 3, in purity and danger, called, I don't have it in my notes here, but it is called The Abomination of Leviticus. Now you would think that's a downer, right? You would think she's going to castigate the book of Leviticus, but she doesn't. She raises it up because she says, here above all, we have a system, a very sophisticated system that tells us that the symbols in Leviticus were not arbitrary, but part of a system that expressed the cultural and societal needs and experiences of the people. Please, she said, pay attention to the book of Leviticus. So, needless to say, on the other side of London, wherever that might be, I suppose it was all in London as well, all of a sudden a community of Jewish scholars took note, serious note. One of those scholars is the author of the commentary on Leviticus in the JPS, the Jewish Publication Society. This is a collection of 5 books, the Torah. He is now the expert on purity and impurity rules in the book of Leviticus. I shouldn't really say that because Christine Hayes now contends that there is a new scholar who is now critiquing Jacob Milgram, the person who did the commentary. But you see, the issue is now alive and going on. Let's take a look at Leviticus with new eyes that we did not have. We did not have the eyes for before. So Mary Douglas is really credited as the person who is the game changer in the whole thing. The last reason why I chose this topic is because of the fact that I am a theologian. And because of my background in theology, I come here to be reinvigorated with ideas and also with scholarship that I do not know. I did not major in biblical studies in graduate school when I was doing my doctorate. I majored in other things that you will hear about along the way. So what happened to me with the book of Leviticus was excitement. I am as excited about the book as anybody could be because it touches areas that are of great interest to me from a different world, from the world of the theologian, not necessarily the biblical scholar. So I listed here some of my sources for today. Of course, I read Robert Alter. I've been reading him all along. Christine Hayes' book, Introduction to the Bible, you who don't know her, she teaches at Yale. Of course, Rabbi Klein. I listened to every one of his talks through the whole pandemic. So, of course, if I'm not here, I stream. And I usually stream later because I must be busy at this time or else I would be here. Jacob Milgram is the person I said who picked up Mary Douglas's insights about purity laws and has incorporated all of them believe me, in granular detail in this commentary on the book of Leviticus. I've just become acquainted with the JPS series this year because I thought I had them in other ways, and then I realized I didn't. So I have been asking my family for my birthday or for any other occasion like Mother's Day to fill out the series for me one by one so I would have them all. They're expensive. Your library has them. Other libraries have them. Case has them. For a while, in the beginning, I was using John Carroll's library. They have them. But I love little jottings in my own copy, so now finally, I have them all. Numbers came a couple of weeks ago, so I'm all set with numbers. In any case, Yaakov Milgram, once you see this name, if you take a look at Leviticus scholarship, he's all over the place. Jonathan Sachs, well, he has books on every, he has his own books on every book of the Torah. I absorbed him because he's such a wonderful writer. So, of course, I've read that book. Well, I can't say I've done the most careful reading of this because I noticed some of you have the Jewish Study Bible. I don't know if you have it here in this session, but it is invaluable when you're looking for a particular word or why is this word here and not here? Anyway, the person who did it is Baruch Schwartz, and it's excellent. I don't think I read all of it, but most of it. And then there's a new book out, so that when Rabbi Klein talks about love, how much he loves it, here's another person who loves it. Some of you know her. This is brand new. It's a couple of months old. This is Aviva Zornberg's book. She's a little offbeat because she wrote this during the pandemic. She has a great facility of just churning these books out. But in it, I'm in a poetry group here at the temple as well. A few months ago, basically, we read Louise Gluck, who just won the Pulitzer Prize at the time. She quotes Louise Gluck in this book. She quotes, you name it. She tosses off these references to so many contemporary things. She's got that kind of mind. She knows these contemporary as well as she knows the rabbis. Every single one of these rabbis writing someplace or other, she incorporates them into the book. Anyway, she calls the book the hidden order, big word in Leviticus, the hidden order of intimacy, reflections on the book of Exodus. And it's intimacy and love that she is talking about. Some of you know I have a vocal cord problem. Let's hope it doesn't kick in during this presentation. So, excitement about Leviticus that I have touches the field that I did my work in. I found no, that's not true. I found 10 areas of interest to me. There's no time for that. I chose 3. And the first area is symbolic thinking. So number 1 in my learning from the book of Leviticus is symbolic thinking. I could give you my references on symbolic thinking that I think you would love, actually. You'd have to write me for them, but I'd be happy to do that. I distilled them, all my thinking about symbolic thinking, into one sentence here, a definition that we can work with. And the definition is, a symbol is a special type of sign that carries a depth of meaning which is evoked rather than explicitly stated. So, I could be wearing a wedding band on my left hand, on the proper finger, and you could say, oh, that's a sign she's married. And I would say, yes. And when I rub it, I can say to you, I think of him, and I just love him all over again. I can't wait to see him. See, I'm rubbing it all the time. And if you see me rubbing it all the time, that simply means thinking of him all the time. So already we're evoking something beyond a sign. We're invoking something that evokes something in us, a meaning beyond a simple ring that you buy. There are levels of symbols, low-level symbols, high-level symbols. The high-level symbols actually participate in that other reality and make it present. Here's an example. Turn your page. It's out of your religious reference points. But the two top pictures are of the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. The picture on the left, upper left, is a picture of the main altar at Notre Dame, not as it is now. First of all, it's in reconstruction right now to be ready December 2024. That's the target date for the opening of Notre Dame. But this is a picture I found on the internet from at least before the Second Vatican Council, when we had the old altar against the wall. In this case, that's not exactly against the wall, but that's the idea. The priest is facing the altar, not the people, etc., etc. And we have a picture of Notre Dame, as you probably know it, on the right-hand side. Well, on November 10th, 1793, at the height of the French Revolution, when the anger at the corruption of the Catholic Church and its complicity with the nobility and its agreement to suppress other religions being practiced in France, when the Roman Catholic Church owned 70% of the property in France, when the people were outraged at the Catholic Church, they, a contingent, a massive contingent, placed on the altar of Notre Dame Cathedral a prostitute. She was clothed. There are all kinds of rumors that she was not clothed. She was clothed. She is the voice of reason, the queen of reason, to take over France, because we've had enough of what's been going on. Now, there happens to be, we're talking about symbols, so let's, keep that in the background, something evoking a meaning rather than one explicitly stated. In urban centers, Cleveland, for example, Paris for another, the urban setting is divided into zones, 944024, etc., all the way down the line. The same thing happens in Paris, except it is designated in terms of arrondissement. Same idea. Arrondissement number 1 is the Ile de la Cité, that place in the center of Paris that divides on the Seine. You have to go over a bridge either way, the left bank from the right bank of Paris. That's the Ile de la Cité. There are things on the Ile de la Cité other than Notre Dame Cathedral, but as you zero into this arrondissement, we find out that the pinpoint of arrondissement, if you can do this and say the center of Paris, believe it or not, on November 10th, 1793, and also today, May 13th, 2023, is the altar at the Cathedral of Notre Dame. Think about symbolism, right? Imagine all of France got these arrondissements. Here's arrondissement number 1. It's not only the geography of soil and building, it's the geography of the country's soul, right? Arrondissement 1, and it has been vilified, it has been desecrated by this action that has taken place, right? One sees that. Well, what happens? What happens is there's another contingent that says, oh my God, what are we going to do? They're not only saying, bring the janitorial staff and that'll take care of it. Although they do that, right? Obviously there's a mop-up involved, but there's something far more significant that we have to do. What can we do? Well, for one thing they do, the people who are horrified at two things: what the Catholic Church has been complicit with, and also what it has led to with this prostitute on the altar of our Notre Dame Cathedral. We have to do more than a mop-up. And one thing that they do is establish 16 orders of nuns and monks, monasteries, to act in reparation. So we have the Sisters of Reparation. We have the Sisters of Reparation to Mary. We have all the way down the line monks and nuns, dedicated people from France, dedicated. We cannot let this happen again, and God must be so displeased with us. I will dedicate my life to pray that our country is forgiven and that our country is restored to God's favor. The second thing they do is they decide we're going to build a building. We're going to build another building, clean this one up, re-sanctify it, rededicate it. But we're going to build another building, and we're going to build it on the highest point in the city of Paris, Montmartre. So left bank. Not that that matters. And we have a picture here on this page, on the left, of the apse, APSC, at Sacré-Cœur, the Basilica of the Sacred Heart at Montmartre. Beautiful mosaic, right? Gorgeous. Over the high altar, I see the high altar sort of in this little picture. But I'd like you to take a look at the wording underneath the Christ figure with his arms outstretched. Do you see it? It's hard to read, but, and I don't know what the lighting is for you. I have perfect lighting up here so I can read very clearly. Are you with me on this? Can you see it? It says in the center, Gallia, the Latin name for Gaul, which is the name for France, right? So Gallia penitens, Gallia repents. That's not exactly the meaning of that word, though, which is interesting. This word penitens, so you see it, P-O-E-N-I-T-E-N-S, is the present participle of the word doing penance. So real translation would be, France is doing penance for many things, because by the time this basilica is finished, there are many things that are thrown in the hopper. And when you look this up, if you do look it up, the history of the Basilica of Notre Dame and the Notre Dame episode with the prostitute, you will find lots of reasons why France is repenting. But among them, number one reason is what happened on November 10, 1793. So, Gaul repents. Now, to the left of Gallia is Jesu. I probably should have needed a comma there, but they weren't interested in that. Incidentally, I've been told these are 14 feet high, these letters. So they're very big. If you go to Montmartre, incidentally, it's the second most visited tourist spot in Paris. Number one, the Eiffel Tower, and number two, the Basilica. Well, it's on a gorgeous setting and all of that kind of stuff. Not Notre Dame, but my hunch is once Notre Dame is finished, that will be the jewel in the crown, as it were. So really it is saying, Jesus, France is repenting. France is in penitential mode for what we've done. If they are 14 feet high, that's pretty tall, right? You can't miss it. Our basketball players are coming in at 7 feet. That would be one basketball player on top of another for one letter, the G. Pretty. These ceilings are 14 feet, more than 14 feet high, right? But you get the idea what 14 feet. Okay, we're still on symbols. You can see why I would be interested in the book of Leviticus on symbols, because there are so many symbols. I list some of them on your first page, and there's one that I missed listing last night when I was doing these sheets. The golden calf is a symbol, sanctuary, Sabbath, Omer. The one I missed was the scapegoat. That's such an obvious symbol, but that's another symbol. It's replete. Well, first of all, the whole book, the whole Torah is filled with symbols. For me, as a theologian, one of the things, I did my dissertation on forgiveness. Yeah, I think that's a fair way to encapsulate what I did, basically, on that area. But because of that, I got wrapped up into liturgy, rites of forgiveness in the Catholic Church, confession, that sort of thing. And when I got wrapped into that, I also got wrapped into the other sacraments as well. Baptism, for example, for the forgiveness of sins. Number one, it's the first sacrament for the forgiveness of sins. And Eucharist. In Catholic Church, those are the two major sacraments. And then we have 5 other ancillary sacraments, but those two. Symbolism. Symbolism in Christianity is that you are baptized and born again into a new life. And we symbolize it by asking a person to be willing to be immersed in water, into a pool of water, a baptistry, as they have all over Europe, but predominantly in Florence, where you see the Medici Chapel and this gorgeous baptistry, and also in Milan, if you have access to the baptistry of Augustine, where you go down 3 steps, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and you are immersed in water and born again, just the way you came out of your mother's womb. Now you are coming out of the water into new life. We're done totally. In the early church, we had deacons who took care of the men, and deaconesses who took care of the women. And I understand you have a rite similar to that when people come into Judaism anew. So you know the water symbolism, the washing again. However, watch what's happened in the Catholic Church with regard to baptism. We have a tiny little baptistry in the church. It's depending on the church. It's modern, it's traditional, it's whatever. And we take a baby, or an adult, but we take the baby, and we say, mothers have said, oh no, you are not dunking my baby on February in this church. It's too cold and it's too dangerous. Just sprinkle a little water. We'll get the idea of dying to Christ and rising. And my baby is wearing a baptismal dress that has been in the family for 3 centuries, for 3 generations, and we possibly undress the baby dress again. So that the little drops will do. Well, unfortunately, the little drops do not contain the same symbolism as the drowning does. Similarly, in the Eucharist calls for bread and wine. Most churches, as some of you know anyway, if you visit it, have a host about the size of a $50. They still make $50. But in some churches, my parish, for example, until it was closed because of the consolidation that simply does have to happen because people aren't going to all these churches the way they went, so it was consolidated. We used bread. We used unleavened bread. There was a loaf available for every Eucharist celebrated in my parish. That's St. Peter's downtown when it was functioning. It is still functioning, it's just not functioning the same way as a Catholic church. When we had a real vibrant community there. In any case, that sufficed. The symbolism, there is one loaf for everybody. Everybody participates in this one loaf. It's not the smart people and the less smart people. There's not the rich people and the poor people. It's not the men and the women. There's no distinction. And there will be enough. We will make enough. If we have more than we expect, you will get a smaller piece that still will contain the symbolism that this is the body of Christ. This is symbolically the body. We are all sharers in the body of Christ. So we've moved from a tablecloth with the one loaf and its justice. The yield of the one loaf is we leave no one out. There will be room for you. There will be food for you. And when the Corinthians violate that rule, Paul comes dashing back with a letter, not in person, saying, oh my God, you are desecrating the whole symbolism that we've cooked up for you. Because now, instead of the tablecloth mentality, when we're all around the table, we have the placemat image. You have your placemat? I have mine. And I like mine better than yours. And actually, there's no more room at this table for another placemat. We're finished. You can go and wait for next week. Maybe there'll be room for you. So symbolism is so critical to the field that I have been working with. Here we have on page 3, with the very convenient numbers listed in the upper left-hand corner, which makes it almost impossible to find, but anyway. Well, interestingly enough, we have the same thing happening before November 10th, 1793. At Sinai, we have the golden calf episode. And the golden calf episode and the calf itself is a symbol. It's a symbol that you could ask anybody about, any intelligent person who has some range of knowledge about history and the Bible. Something stand out, the golden calf story. Now, what Judaism does, in fact, is also what Christianity does. We've copied this from you. We copy, as you know, an awful lot from you. It distinguishes sin mortal sin, venial sin, capital offenses, lesser offenses. But we both agree, Christianity agrees with Judaism on these three capital offenses: murder, idolatry, and sexual transgressions. This is how we say it. Murder, apostasy, and adultery. So we use the word apostasy, meaning giving up faith. You use the word idolatry. They're really talking about the same thing. Here's a little quote from, what makes a sin, a real sin, are these three things, for you and for me. I mean, this all comes from your literature. I don't specify exactly where everything is coming from, but this is of great interest to me. This I knew when I was writing my dissertation, but it still bears repeating. Three things make a sin. Serious matter. Oh, I forgot the bagels today. No, it doesn't count as a serious sin. It's just not serious enough. You've got to be kidding me, think that's serious. And you have to be very clear about the fact that it is serious, because otherwise you'd be turning into some kind of, neurotic, for sure. Sufficient reflection. I've actually thought about this plan that I have. And that's probably wrong, but what the heck. I might get away with it. And I could talk myself out of an awful lot of things. I could talk you out of thinking that I'm doing something wrong. But sufficient reflection and full consent of the will. What's missing in this lineup, for you, Jews, and for me as a Christian, and it's good that it's missing, is I don't have to do it. I can just think it. I can plan it out. And that's a sin. So, right, it's a sin of omission or commission. I don't have to think about it. There are other ways of thinking about sins of omission, and you are far more attentive to it. Leviticus far more attentive than the Christian literature on the subject and the Christian practice on the subject. You are far more conscious of sins of omission. What we could have done. What you could have done. Talking wife to husband, parent to child. What you could have done. Oh yeah, I know, but I was busy. Oh yeah, I know, but everybody else is doing it, so I didn't. No, you have to pay attention to what you could have done. We honor that, for sure. Christians honor that idea. You don't do it in such granular detail as you do, especially in the book of Leviticus. What you could have done but didn't do. That kind of omission. So, this is what Aviva says in that book, page 1. Any reference to a page is from the sources that I've indicated on page 1. One day, as I was reflecting on the book of Leviticus, I had a sudden intuition regarding the pervasive presence of the golden calf, an image that haunts the midrashic narratives that thread through this biblical text. In meaning and in fantasy, that catastrophic episode gives depth and resonance to the entire book of Leviticus. So yes, I know the golden calf. You might have already said it to yourself. Why is she doing golden calf? It's Exodus and not Leviticus. Well, there's not a scholar that I've touched base with, and I'll grant you my touching base is extremely limited, but there's not one who doesn't say the same thing. You read Leviticus, and in the background and in the text, all over the place are fingerprints of the golden calf episode. That's why we're doing all of these things, ladies and gentlemen. That's why we have purity laws. That's why we have to reconstitute the people who have sacrificed their identity and their covenant with God back to normalcy. So, what I want to skip a few things here and move down to number 5. This, to me, is a really profound insight in the book of Leviticus. It comes from Jonathan Sachs. The words do. After I had an idea, I scrounged around for words to defend what I thought about, so that if you have any argument about what I'm saying, you could blame these people and not me. We can only understand Leviticus in terms of the spiritual crisis that led to the golden calf. And I underline, a crisis that led to. This is, for me, something that Moses does that's really exceptional. What does he do? Well, he's a prophet. Prophets normally look to the future because of the present. Woe to you if you keep this up, because this will happen unto you. Moses says, this is great leadership. Yeah. But let's find out what caused the problem. Oh no, that'll take too long. Let's just fix it. Moses is not a fixer. He's a thinker that says, yeah, well, we'll take care of fixing. But let's go back to the problem. He diagnoses the problem this way. He says 3 things caused the golden calf. Number 1, immaturity on the part of the Israelites. They acted like children. They acted like 4, 5, 6-year-olds. They acted like children who wanted immediate gratification. Really now. Here, Moses says to himself, I'm sure, I go up the mountain to talk to God. Oh yeah, I was there a long time, far longer than they expected. Yes, and they were tired, and they were hungry. And they said, we need something to worship around, to dance around. That's why I chose this from Wikipedia, this little valuable picture up here. I love the idea that they're dancing and carousing. I love the idea that they're having a good time. We need a good time, and you're not here. So we'll make our own time. We got loads of gold and jewelry from the Egyptians. Remember when we left? They all gave us a lot of baggage. Let's toss it in and make a golden calf. What a great idea. Yes, a great idea. And Moses says, we should have waited. The second thing that Moses says is the problem, is that they missed the divine presence. They missed knowing, and I told them, God is with us. God is feeding you manna when there is no food. What more could you want of God than this? But you slip out of the picture because you're up on the mountain. It's not working. And thirdly, they missed me as a leader. I'm not the greatest leader. He's told us this from the beginning, Moses has. I don't speak well, I don't do this well, I don't do that well, but I'm a leader, and I wasn't there. So we have to go back and rectify the causes. That is, to me, brilliant. Brilliant. Because it didn't happen at the Notre Dame episode. Nobody went back and said, what's causing all of this? They just went to fix. And there is a tendency to go to fix. The wisdom that's here in the story of what Moses does is so brilliant. It's brilliantly prophetic. This is what a prophet really does. A prophet has telescopic vision. It's the past, the present, and the future that the prophet sees, and that most of the time, and that Moses sees here. What about, well, then we go into a long period in the book of Exodus about Moses negotiating with God. You have to be here. No, I'm not. No, I'm not going to be there. Yes, you have to be. You don't understand. They need you. And then a final compromise. You have a sanctuary. I will be in the sanctuary. It's not the same. Yeah, it's not the same. But there will shine my glory. I can promise you that. I'm everywhere, God says. Don't forget that. But I will be present. The divine presence will rest in the sanctuary for the people. I don't know if it's going to work. It'll work, God says. Well, there's an awful lot to be said that I'm not saying now in this little episode of my speaking with you right now. But, did it work or not? And the next thing is, I'm not going to be around. I figured that one out. People are dying. And I'm not going to be here. I'm not going to be the one running up and down doing things. Yeah, don't worry about that. You have the sanctuary. You will, God says to Moses, reestablish, no, it's already existing priesthood. You will reestablish the prominence of the cultic priesthood. And he does. That'll be constant. That'll be regular. That'll be predictable, not given to chance and circumstances. So the sanctuary is ready, and holiness is out there. It's not going to be out there for a long time. We have to go from 1 until 17 when the holiness code comes in, but it's out there as an offering. And for a while, we have an awful lot of rituals. We have an awful lot of talk about purity. We have an awful lot of talking about impurity. But I don't know that you were here at the very beginning, Patty, but I mentioned to everybody that you mentioned Mary Douglas when you were doing this Torah study a few weeks ago. And Mary Douglas does say that purity is the key to all religions, to all societies. So that's where we're leaving this. But wow, is this ever one insight after the next? Insight about Moses' ability, which is rather extraordinary. And insights into how we reframe the issues that caused the problem in the first place. We're talking about symbols in this section. What is the golden calf a symbol of? Well, an abomination, a sin, disobedience, anything else? My second interest is sin. My third interest, coming up on page 5, is going to be holiness. So, what I'm trying to do is, within each of these topics that interest me, is tell you what I have found of enormous enlightenment in the book of Leviticus. So I'm not trying to tell you, I'm not trying to summarize everything about sin, because that's impossible with regard even to this book. Incidentally, not even with regard to a chapter, but to single out things that I find remarkable. So, what I say in the beginning, and we'll skip right over it, is Leviticus offers a very comprehensive study of sin. Wow, couldn't ask for anything more. You name it, it's covered. To tell you the truth, there's nothing not covered. The golden calf episode represents this falling away from the Sinai movement and intimacy, etc. And now because of the sanctuary, because of these rules and regulations, we're hoping to revive the covenant. And we're going to move down to number 4, to this insight. It says, I say, the attention that's given into the book of Leviticus to minor infractions and lesser offenses before they escalate is exemplary. Now, Christianity did the same thing. Christianity went into the vernacular. And this is a book that contains excerpts. This is from my days writing a dissertation. It's yellow and it smells a little moldy by now. This is an example. This is an example of going into cultic detail in Christianity. This, I'm reading from this document that comes from the year 650, the 7th century. If the host, communion host, consecrated, if the priest loses the host in the church so that a part falls and is not found, he shall do penance for 20 days. Another rule, one who vomits the host because his stomach is overloaded with food will do 20 days penance or 40. Right after that, if moreover dogs, D-O-G-S, consume the vomit, the holy host, he shall do penance for 100 days. Get the idea? We are going into the granular. But nothing is saying, and therefore what we will do is attention to minor details, like be sure everything's clean, be sure you don't lose things. Listen, if you need, get a beeper that tells you where you lost it, but don't lose hosts, for heaven's sake. Here's another one. There are zillions of them, but here are a few. This, I think there are about 60 excerpts from penitential books that existed. They're really hard to get. Basically, they're all now available on microfilm, but this is just a little. Gives you an idea of what's going on. This is the relationship that you should have with your bishop. Your bishop should be revered, respected. But this is the rule, number 5. One who strikes or molests a bishop without shedding blood shall pay half the price of 7 female slaves. Now, what kind of a civilization are we living in? With blood, it's worse. This was without blood. This is the one I love, number 6. But if any of his hairs are plucked out in the altercation, any of the bishop's hairs are plucked out, satisfaction shall be made for every hair. That is 12 hairs for each hair plucked out. Are we not dealing with really going too far with some rules and regulations? What Leviticus does, though, it is brilliant in handling sin. Just the way Moses went back to the causes, the writers of Leviticus, the priestly writers said, listen, we can save the situation by paying attention to the things before they escalate. Before we have murder, how about paying attention to gossip, How about paying attention to the one that I give here? You shall not bear a grudge against your countrymen. That's actually the translation from the Tanakh. You shall not bear a grudge. Before it escalates, handle this thing so that you avoid the bigger problem. That is replete in the book of Exodus. It is extraordinary. One other little tidbit about that, to go back to number 1 and number 2 here. The first sacrifices offered in chapters 1 and 2, incidentally, bingo, right away, you open the book of Exodus and it says, Moses, go and say to the people, you shall offer sacrifices. Like, hello? Excuse me, where did this come from, right? Last thing I heard, we had a golden calf. Last time, what? What's this stuff? These sacrifices, initially, 1 and 2, chapters 1 and 2, are voluntary sacrifices. Why are you giving them? Well, I'm giving them because we had a baby, and I'm so happy about it. And so I'm offering, in my economic background, we're offering it a turtle dove. We're offering grain, the best from our field. But we're so happy. So these are sort of like these things that I read in your bulletin about donating flowers for the Bima on Friday night, donating bagels, I suppose, voluntary, happy occasions, emotional occasions. Changes in chapter 4. But watch the strategy and psychology of the book here. So for somebody like me writing on forgiveness and reconciliation and sin, and having that really as my field, this is like amazing. Chapter 4 and following, because it goes through jury rights at 7, 8, and 9, dietary laws in 7, 8, and 9, et cetera, et cetera. There are some things I'm going to offer a sacrifice for. Yeah, it wasn't right, but I didn't realize it. You know, I ordered pea soup. I asked, do you put ham in your pea soup? No, we never use ham here. We only use peas. That's all we use. And broth. No dairy at all. And I eat my pea soup. And I'm walking out of the restaurant and my server says to me, oh, you're the lady who ordered the pea soup. You were right, it does have ham in it. No, forget it, right? I mean, I had it, was good, fine. No. Leviticus says, no, do a sin offering. Well, yeah, do it anyway. Because you did violate. Yes, it was unintentional. Do I say that? Yeah, I said unintended offenses. How clever. Get in the habit of starting before a problem emerges. Because now that I've had this soup with the ham, I actually liked it a lot. I hope she makes a mistake the next time I come. I'll ask, you know. I won't ask her because she knows, but I'll ask the next server. And, you know, get in front of the problem. So, here, the big issue in Leviticus, they're all big issues, you know. You go to a funeral, you're in the vicinity of the corpse, you offer a sacrifice for this unintended, inevitable violation. It's inevitable. But I do it to get in the habit of noticing things. And the more I notice before a problem, the better. I love the quote from Leviticus 19:14. It's listed on number 5 here, the stumbling block. And this is a quote from Aviva Zornberg that sort of captures it for me. The stumbling block idea urges that one develop not only a conscience, but a consciousness of the shadier modes of collaborating with violence. These are her words. I wouldn't say violence myself, but I wanted to give you a good quote. Yes, consciousness, raising your consciousness. Oh, I was supposed to pick up the bagels and I didn't. They'll understand. Oh, well, that's an interesting thing to say, though, because Leviticus is also very conscious of the ripple effect of sin. The ripple effect that gets other people involved in my sin. Maybe you won't understand that I didn't pick up the bagels. Maybe you skipped breakfast so that you could have a bagel. Maybe you got a ticket rushing here to get your bagel for speeding, et cetera, et cetera. So extend this notion of the stumbling block. I selected one out of many in blue on your page. The wages of a laborer shall not remain with you until morning, for a variety of reasons, but I can think of one, and that is I needed the money and you didn't pay me on time. I mean, you might think I have some, but I don't have cash. I was sort of counting on this money. I was counting on paying somebody else with the money. The ripple effect that's caused. It's brilliant. And it's all part of Leviticus. And lastly, let me see how I'm doing here. Holiness. Needless to say, we could spend 6 weeks on holiness, but we don't go 6 weeks. We have a few minutes left. Be holy. Aviva says, so do everybody else says, but she's got a great quote. I'll read it to you. Because once you come into chapter 17, chapter 16, of course, Yom Kippur, the penitential rites once a year. Whoa, I mean, this is amazing, right? We go into all kinds of symbolism. The priestly vestment is white. Imagine all that paraphernalia goes, et cetera, et cetera. The only one to enter the Holy of Holies. All these prayers on behalf of everybody. Oh, incidentally, something I didn't say and I probably won't have a chance to say. There is punishment in the book of Leviticus. It's not all, making sacrifices. There's punishment. It's punishment by death, as a matter of fact, in the book of Leviticus. Shedding blood means your blood will be shed. Well, anyway, you end with this drama of what becomes Yom Kippur. To chapter 17, first words, say to the people, be holy. What? This should catch us like, you've got to be kidding. So, what does it mean to be holy? Well, for me, it means these things in summary. First of all, we're moving from being, we're moving to being from doing. Do, don't. Chapter 1, 2, 3, all the way through 16. Do, don't. There's other stuff, right? But only 2 narratives in the whole book. Most of the rest is do. Now we're told to be. Pause, stop. Stop everything and be. How relaxing that feels. This is what Aviva says. Like a pool of sunlight in a tangled forest, the demand of holiness moves us from a world of specific taboos, anomalies, and abominations, taboos, anomalies, and abominations, to a blinding moment of aspiration. Sorry for messing that quote up. I have it in partial shorthand. Do you ever try that? A little note to yourself in partial shorthand, and you read it. Like a pool of sunlight to a blinding moment of aspiration. Well, you have to get your, you have to still get your feet on the ground. How did this happen? So I'm moving to being. It's a paradox. How am I supposed to do this? God is totally other. How am I supposed to be like God? You're asking me something that's impossible. No. 17, number 1 says, be holy. Actually, it does. Leviticus 19:2 says, be holy, for I, God, am holy. Not easy to define, but holiness has to do with more. The law is not enough, but the law is telling me there's more than the law. The law points to something beyond the law. Of course it does. I'm made in the image and likeness of God. There is more. Holiness is nurtured by following laws that promote growth, but the law is not enough. I have a sense of that that's growing. Why do I have a sense? Well, because I have been following the law for all these chapters. Holiness has to do with imitation. Well, I'm supposed to be imitating God. For Ramban, it's walking in God's ways. Perceiving in the scripture the ways of God, and I am in imitation of them. I hear about them, I read about them. This is who I want to be. This is who God wants me to be. The yield of holiness is that it's win-win. I become more fully who I'm supposed to be, and God's destiny for me is fulfilled. This is what God wants. But it isn't only He who's getting something out of this, it's I as well. Now, what I find in reading this, like the insight for me, thing that I came today to say what excites me, is walking not in God's ways, well, they are God's ways, but walking in the ways of a person alive, or maybe not alive, but a person who has been walking in God's ways, and I have perceived that. I saw that in that person. I know that in that person. I don't even know that person, but reading about this person who has walked in God's ways, a person like me, like you, and I'm edified. The word means to build up. Edifies, right? To build. I'm built up because I see this person and I perceive in this person. No, this person not fooling me. This is the real thing. So, what I found in Jonathan Sacks at the end of his book, so you walk in God's ways, or you walk preliminarily, shall we say, or symbolically through another person, or walking in the ways of a different sort of person. These are Sacks's italics, not mine. I'm walking in the ways of a different sort of person, one who radiates a present beyond herself. I chose the feminine here for a reason. It is not easy to define what makes people holy, but you recognize it by their demeanor, their way of relating to people, their gentleness, their gravitas, their humility. If you were at, or like me, streaming Roger's sermon a week ago Friday, he spoke about this woman, Meep Geese. If you haven't seen the series, I highly recommend it. It's produced by Nat Geo, National Geographic. I saw it because I have a subscription on Hulu. It's on Disney Plus, it's on others. It's on Nat Geo, as a matter of fact, if you belong to that with, you know, how this is. You have to belong with the X next to your name or something to get it. 6 parts, 4 are available now, and the last 2 come this Tuesday. It is extraordinary. It's called A Small Light. Anyway, Roger, who had not seen it because he just read about it in the paper before it started, recommended it simply on the basis of what he read. And I read about it in the paper too. I wasn't really going to look especially for it, but after he recommended it, I thought, yeah, maybe I will. I love it. She is the woman who helped the Franks hide. She is Austrian, I think, by birth. She's born in Vienna. We don't really care about that. She just died recently, as a matter of fact. And it's a stunning, startling, gripping story. But it is so lovely and so beautiful and so human and so, I found myself laughing. I found myself so joyful through it all. She is simply extraordinary. When in the trailer, which has been available for a long time, in the trailer when Otto Frank, who has hired her without qualification to work in his business, he comes to her one day and says, I am going to ask your help with something that is so extraordinary. You have every reason to say no, and you have every reason to decline, and you have every reason to take a lot of time to think this over. You need time. And she says, no, I won't. Tell me what to do. And it is so gripping from the beginning that this young woman, she's a kid, basically, does what she does. There's no glossing over anything. It is, I highly recommend it. He highly recommended it. And at the end of his sermon, he said, she, me, peace, made God present in our world. And I thought, you know, I can follow God's ways. But when I see them acted out and lived out in a person, it's a whole new ballgame. This is what's possible. This is what's possible for each of us. It's not easy to define what holiness is, but it has to do with number 6, everything. And once I came to that conclusion, and then I found this quote from Sachs. Holiness is to be made manifest in the way a nation makes its clothes and plants its fields, in the way justice is administered, workers are paid, and business is conducted, the way the vulnerable, the deaf, the blind, the elderly, and the stranger are to be afforded special protection. The whole society is to be governed by love without resentment or revenge. So it turns out that it's not being instead of doing, it's being and doing. We did a lot of doing in sanctuary. We did a lot of being and being holy, but it's the combination of being and doing in order to make God present in our world. So that's my presentation, and I am available to discuss it with you. Incidentally, and I thought of putting it in there, but I do want to say it now, I am a stranger to you. I'm not a Jew. Some of you know my father was Jewish, was a Jew. No, he was not Jewish, as a matter of fact, probably. I mean, he was not an observant Jew. But really because of my mom, who was Catholic, a wonderful woman, extraordinary woman, unbelievable mother. Happy Mother's Day, incidentally, to all of us who had mothers, and are mothers. But I am a stranger here, and from the beginning I have been welcomed by you. I think often that I don't know that you would be welcome as normally in my church. People would be polite, for sure. I hope they would be at least polite. I hope they would be courteous. I hope they would be kind, etc. But I don't know about the warmth and the the hospitality in the real core sense of the word. I really don't know. And maybe I would not be as welcome in other synagogues as I am here. That's also true. So I can only speak to you. Now, Mipkis is an exception, right? But I have felt that at Torah Study, sometimes when you offer comments, I think that's an extraordinarily deep, personal comment from an ordinary person in my midst today. And I leave edified. Of course, Frederick does it frequently, this combination of scholarship and personal involvement that he has. But I also hear it here. And so when I leave sometimes with information that I didn't have before, and that I'm really happy because my life is education, so, be really happy about that. But I also leave with something else, and it has to do with this idea. Sometimes I do feel that God has been made present to me because of you. So I thank you for that. So, yeah.
First of all, I should say, I believe you said that you were a member of the community of St. Peter's.
Yeah.
We've been there. We've been to weddings there. Arthur's done a lecture there. They treated us royally, warmly, and as members of the human family. Also, I've been watching Leopoldstadt by Tom Stoppard.
You've been watching it?
Yes.
It's available?
I have it
Yes.
on DVD. I'll bring it to you.
I saw it on Broadway.
Okay.
I did. Yeah.
But Grandma Emilia says we're Jews. Bad Jews, perhaps, but Jews nonetheless.
Yeah.
And I believe that fits us because we don't observe the regulations or the laws faithfully, but we observe more or less. We know what we're missing out on. So that's important.
Okay. Thank you for that. You know, of course, the sanctuary has been replaced, in a manner of speaking, by the home.
Yeah.
So some things are fungible. Change. All these regulations don't exist anymore. Well, in a way, I suppose they do. I mean, don't gang up on Bishop, but you wouldn't have hairs plucked out of your head. Patty?
Thanks, Doris. You've really brought me a lot closer to Leviticus than I've been all these years, trying to understand it, and I would just get like lost in the weeds. It helped to actually be asked to do Torah Study a few weeks ago, so I can think about it differently, but you've taken it to a whole new level. I respond mostly to your very last comment about everything, the being and doing, because I think the more I see corruption and corporate greed and environmental devastation, like the stuff that makes me crazy every day, the more I double down on trying to be a good person in my interactions and my work and coming here, because this is definitely a holy space for me. And it made so much sense the way you put it in terms of Leviticus, that when I'm cultivating in myself is in response to pushing away the forest and looking for that light. And what we do every day makes a difference.
Every day. Every day. I don't have to tell you this, but with the school shootings, the ripple effect of that on children every day all across America is horrifying. Horrifying. Right? I mean, I read in the Times, this is months ago, about a little boy who wants to be president of his class, fourth grader. And he has a brother in the 7th grade, and he's in the kitchen, and he tells his mom, what I'm going to run on, my platform, is I'm going to get brown paper and put it over the windows in our class so that a killer won't see us. And the mother's there, saying, oh my God. Right? But his older brother says, are you kidding? A killer's just going to come right in and bust open the door. You'll never be a class president on that platform. And I'm thinking, oh, there's no conversation that goes on about it. You know, like, unbelievable, the ripple effect of all these families, right? So, but what we're talking about also is the opposite ripple effect. Every good act has a ripple effect. So every act, and that's why I love this notion that Roger really dealt with at greater length. Oh, that would be another thing, to stream that sermon. That was a good sermon. It was very simple and very direct and really, really very on target. What this woman does that I would like to imitate. And I think, would I do, when you see the production, would I do what she does? I don't want to spoil anything for you. I could give you lots of little examples. There's a ripple effect that says what you did back in 1939, 40, 41, is so relevant to me in Cleveland, Ohio in 2023. Would I do this, that, the other thing, to change the status quo? Yes, Malcolm.
Talk just a little bit about your experience of the teaching of theology from an academic perspective in contrast to teaching from the pulpit.
This would be a class. Well, first of all, I guess it would be a class. No, it wouldn't be. I couldn't compress all of that into for me.
Well, I mean, I guess another way to ask this is, how does the experience of studying theology from an academic point of view, which is your career, I think, in contrast to learning as a person, a member of the church, or a member of the synagogue?
Gosh, I simply love what I do. I see both of them mingling together. If you're asking, if I'm missing something in the question.
Well, I guess I think in a pure sense, I think the academy is a place for wrestling with problems. People are on equal footing in terms of arguing a thesis. And it seems to me that in the church or in the synagogue, there is a hierarchy of expertise, if you will. And does that, is that a conflict for you or?
I guess I don't see a conflict. I work professionally. I have not, shall we say, towards the end of my career, I left teaching because I had been given several grants, and I was working for foundations. And when I was working for foundations, very much what I did was I was working with the Catholic Church Foundation. I was in Rome all the time. I was dealing with bishops all the time. I was dealing with cardinals all the time. And I felt really very much at home. And I felt very much respected. Yes, that. So I had that experience, sort of like the business side of theology. My field is of interest to an awful lot of people, so I have colleagues in the field of liturgy, and I'm in those societies still, professional societies, and I prepare papers on occasion for them. And teaching, though, you get a mix of students. I find lately students interested in theology because they're getting good stuff. They're getting professional people trained in theology who know a particular field that's of interest, just the way things in literature are of interest. I started as an English major at UCLA, and then because I was living in California, married without children for a very long time, and needed something to do, and then was asked in a Catholic high school that I was teaching English at to teach religion, and the bishop had to approve me. I had to meet with the bishop, He approved me, there was no problem. I actually forget where I was going with that. Just that. Then, when I started teaching, I went immediately to get a degree. I thought, this is fun. This is so interesting. And worked through a degree. And then got pregnant, of course, right in the middle of my studies. And did my dissertation defense with a friend who took care of my son in the car while I was defending upstairs, and at break I nursed Christopher, and then went right back up and finished the dissertation defense. And it worked. I mean, it was just something you do. You know, you have a baby, and you have to take care of the baby. So it worked. Fortunately, I also had a woman on committee who was a mother, and that helped a lot. So yeah, I've just been having a good time, actually. So I think we still have. Yeah.
Is it important to you to write and publish your ideas about how you feel and how you act? Or I'm trying to figure out whether it's okay to do this one person at a time, to start with myself and the people I interact with, or if it's more important to do it to a more widespread audience, because it's awful slow, methodical work to do things one person at a time, and it's hard work to work on yourself and your particular circle and environment.
You're right. Well, as far as writing and publishing, it's de rigueur. It's absolutely required if you're in the academic world. So you write, and you write. Personally, I find writing on the readable level, shall we say, harder than doing academic writing. A little bit of what I did today, I just tell you my sources. Don't ask me anymore about this. This is what so-and-so says about what I think. And if so-and-so agrees with what I think, who are you to question me? Because I didn't support it. He did, she did. So that's easier than to go out. And it all depends what you're doing and where you feel comfortable and where you really love what you're doing. And I've had a life of, not always, but most of the time, totally, completely loving what I'm doing. So, and learning. I mean, I come here to learn, and I am learning. And you know, we have the best with Rabbi Klein, simply extraordinary. The breadth of knowledge, the style of presentation that's so informal yet deep. It's extraordinary. How can you not learn? Yes. Right? I'm done. Yes. Well, yes. Goodbye to everybody streaming. And thank you all for everything.
I just have to say, if I see you as a symbol of coordination,
Thank you. Thank you.
You all provide as individual. Really did very well. I love all your anecdotal things that brought it down and then goes up.
It's coming up soon. I showed Margie and she said she might go there.
Yeah,
I hope.
yeah.
Have you got the rules?
I know that everybody's late, so that's fairly consistent.
Yeah.
Oh, just so thankful for this today. I'm just,
It's okay.
it was wonderful. It's so humble.
Oh, this was
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for that. Really.
So, just thank you. Yeah, I'm starting to study more than just casually coming in here, so.
This breaks down.
Do you mind dropping mine
Not
on?
at all.
Is that a Bible?
Oh,
Yeah,
this
yeah,
is
yeah.
like- oh,
Okay,
yeah, I'm going
good.
that way.
I figured you.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is-
Oh, yeah, because
This is just like,
about.
this is just a taste of everybody. It's really, it's very accessible.
Yeah, well,
It's
see,
like
that's what
Cliff
I do.
Notes.
I buy everything he mentions. And I have like 2.5 shelves. Roger Klein's 4 years ago.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you for being here. May I give you a hug?
I'm grateful that I understand.
Oh, you're welcome. I had this morning
Well, if you did, we wouldn't know. So
yeah,
I have a comment and a question. You so effortlessly bridge the academic you express yourself as a poet, even though I know that the academic world is there for you. I had a discussion with my question is this, and I have a feeling the answer is going to be this. Your field.
No.
I thought she was finished. I waited. Okay, so anyway, I had a discussion with Roger once about the academic side of Judaism. I read about the 3 authors or 3 groups of authors, and I can't remember the names, like a Jade, a K, and something else. You didn't hear about it. That's it, thank you. And so I said, this doesn't necessarily look like it's divine. And he said, and he took out what you take out, which is the emotional and useful part for us. And yet acknowledge this and acknowledge the things. Do you feel that way as well? Do you see a conflict there? I mean, this can be just so academic, and yet this is a very, I written it down when Patty talked about it too. It's in,
Yeah.
notes that I got.
And living in
Always pays you, but pays you just one time. And it's annoying, there are guys who won't play with you. That doesn't bother me. It's good to come to it for fun. That's the hobby.
And this is I mean, you are very
But he like bringing into other areas and just delving into all you.
Agreed. Or this.
Yes, right.
A question for an entirely different approach to the newspaper article about the
Right.
because I felt Oh, you
His
were?
last week.
Yeah, you were there. Yeah. That was good. That's good. It really changed my
Thank you very much.
Three people emailed me.
Oh, did they?
Yes, you were absolutely right. And I just replied to their email.
Really? How wonderful.
I'll tell you who they, I
Great.
thought,
So it
no,
worked.
I said, nobody's going to do that, but
No,
even just giving it over the, you were right.
Wow.
So I'm probably the only negative Nelly who's going to come up and die today. I do not know. I can't stand because when it reminds me of growing up with a person like my father, it reminds me of a drill sergeant in basic training. And I realized you will do this and you will like this. And there are too many, somebody go out there and have the courage to lady of grace. I won't please nobody will talk about it. You know exactly. I can't eat that stuff. Like Klein, it's a fire issue. Yeah. But even if you go, why don't give me there's still we're all we are entitled to think what we want, how we want. You get up this place and when I tell you I'll pick and choose what I like. Oh, because I like Rabbi Klein's metaphors of things and things. I don't love baseball like him, but I understand it enough to know what he's talking about. So, I'm sorry, you are a brilliant woman. I'm envious of the hard work that you have done, because I teach a little bit, not like you, but a little bit at Tri-C. And being in front of students, there's nothing like it. And I was going to comment on Malcolm's question, which was academia versus a priest giving a homily or a rabbi giving a sermon. And the difference is you're a captive audience in church or it's there, and you can't walk out and say, I disagree with you. I keep on hearing, even my wife, she said, that's bad manners. Well,
But I just.
but when we're here, we're here because we want to be. My father's rolling over in his grave right now because he would have never thought when I got to this age that I would go. Because he and I
And I can't remember
toe
what
to
else
toe
in
a lot
around Syracuse.
the importance to grow of the education here. But it's been great. Now we're taking confirmation, which I know is different than Christian confirmation. He said, now you're going to go to Hebrew high school. And I just went,
The company comes,
So,
always cleaning
as
all
much
the
as I
floor,
could, as I grew up,
making sure you
I
like
walked away
it,
from a
this
lot
and
of it.
that.
I couldn't walk away.
Yeah.
And hello, I got kids, and so they have to learn
It's okay, hard work.
as best as I can tell them what they
Yeah,
are.
I know.
And then let them make their own choices.
Oh, so they'll be back tonight?
No, I have respect for what you
And I
have
have
to
respect for what you said.
say. And the same thing is I
Oh,
was
that's
thinking,
good. Yeah, he won't
I
mind,
talked to
it'll
you
be
last
just
week or the
fine.
week before.
She won't mind.
Evil and Law stumps me because he liked the rigor of Catholicism, but in Brideshead Revisited, he kicked it to the curb.
Yep.
And I said, how can you, they said he appreciated the discipline. And yeah, there is that.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it with him and with others as well is you're born into it and you cannot extract yourself from it.
Patty London has. She's doing what I call a balancing act.
I'm talking specifically, he had to,
Oh, he couldn't, no.
but others have, of course. And vice versa.
And the other mistake I made is I should have come up and got rid of my foolish pride and sat up closer to you because it was a little hard to hear back there, and it must be part of old man-itis. And my hearing, but no. I'm here right now and I can hear everything loud and
Oh,
clear.
that's bad. That's bad.
Yeah,
What you do, you contribute every week matters. It's wonderful you're here. I wish
Oh, you picked up
I knew
those
how
today.
you and Rabbi Klein first met.
here.
You picked, how did you find out that this existed?
I moved into Three Village, and somebody there said, come, and I said, no, I've had 80 years of this, I don't want any more.
I got you.
Somebody told you about it.
Yeah, somebody told me
And
about
look
it,
at
and
you, you're a
brought
big,
me, and brought me.
and you are a big deal,
I
big
don't
time
take your name
contributor.
after.
You are.
But I need to go to Jack's.
You're not originally from Cleveland, am I right?
Yeah, not completely.
Thank you for doing what you did today.
Well, thank you, really, thank you.
So that is here, and I spent $100 on.
I'm on my way to a pedicure
Doris,
and a manicure.
that was wonderful. And don't ever feel you're an outcast.
Oh, well, I know,
I mean,
yes.
you've been coming probably longer than I have.
Could be. I know it could be because I picked them all up when I'm not here. A lot. I mean, streaming.
Yeah.
Do you see a small, whatever that show is?
The meat piece show. I wrote it down, and I'm
I see it
gonna,
on your,
you know what, I'm gonna invite you over to
Oh, yeah.
come and watch it on Hulu. But first I'm gonna try to get it myself, because I'm not great with technology.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure that I can. And my son told me that he gets Hulu and he signed me up. You know, I get HBO and give it to him, and he gets Hulu, gives it to me. The kids are very generous about sharing that. So if I can work it out, I'll
I
invite
hate
you.
getting all these little things every month on my checking account, $7.99, $9.99.
Yeah, I know.
Right? I mean,
Right.
man,
Yeah, I know, it's all costly, but I only had to pay for one because.
yeah, I
no, but you have to pay for everything.
Yeah, I know, I mean, Amazon Prime is like, whatever, but,
Next time you see me, I'll have a new toes.
oh, that's wonderful, it's a nice afternoon. Good.
Right, right.
This was like a life-changing
Yeah, it was
lecture
wonderful.
for me.